"This is the police. Open the door." The shout was so loud it shook the dust from the old window frame. I froze. My paintbrush was still in my hand, dripping colonial blue onto the drop cloth. I was on my hands and knees in the foyer, trying to restore a 100-year-old piece of hardwood flooring. I looked out the window. It wasn't just one officer. It was 3 patrol cars. Their red and blue lights were flashing, silently painting the street in strobing bursts of panic. And there she was, standing on the sidewalk like a general accepting a surrender. Karen, the HOA president from the wealthy Harmony Creek neighborhood, the one next door. She had her arms crossed, a smug, satisfied look on her face, and she was pointing directly at my front door. I opened the door. A tall officer was standing there, his hand resting on his belt. His expression was not friendly. "Sir, we received a 911 call about a trespasser who has illegally occupied this property." My stomach turned to ice. "Trespasser? Officer, I own this house. I'm renovating it." That's when Karen marched right up onto the lawn, her clipboard held like a weapon. "Officer, that's him," she announced, her voice loud enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. "He's the squatter. This property," she said, waving her hand not just at my house, but at the entire row of old houses on this block, is designated HOA Future Development Common Land. This man broke in, changed the locks, and started construction without a single permit. He is trespassing. I was in shock. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an ambush. Neighbors from her side of the street, the Harmony Creek side, were coming out onto their perfect, manicured lawns, filming with their phones. "Sir," the officer said, turning back to me. His voice was hard. "I'm going to need to see some identification." "Of course," I said, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my wallet. "My name is Harrison. I have my driver's license, my utility bills, my deed is in my car." Karen let out a sharp, theatrical laugh. "Oh, officer, he's a professional squatter. They always have fake documents. I'm sure he's very convincing." She stepped forward, pushing past me as if she already owned the place, and pointed at my tools on the floor. "You see? He's already started destroying HOA property. This entire block has been abandoned for 10 years. It's a blight on our community. We, the HOA, voted last night to annex it. He is here illegally. I want him arrested for trespassing and vandalism." The officer looked from her, to me, and back to her. He was starting to get annoyed, but he was taking her seriously. She had the clipboard. She had the confidence. She had the authority. I was just a guy in paint-splattered jeans, being accused of stealing my own house. "Ma'am, do you have proof this is HOA land?" the officer asked her. "Right here," she said, tapping her clipboard. "The official Harmony Creek Annex Plan, filed with the county this morning. And here," she held up a photo, "is a picture of this property from yesterday, before he broke in and put up his own 'No Trespassing' sign. He's a menace." The officer looked at me. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside. You are on contested property." "Contested?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's not contested. It's mine." Karen just smiled. That cold, certain smile. She had me. She had the police. She had the neighbors. She had the paperwork. She thought she had won. She was standing on my lawn, in front of my house, telling the police to arrest me. What she didn't know was that she wasn't just talking to a renovator. She wasn't just trespassing on my lawn. She was trespassing on my block. She thought she had filed paperwork to annex one abandoned block. She had no idea she was picking a fight with the man who had legally and secretly bought all 12 houses on it. 6 weeks ago. To understand just how badly Karen had miscalculated, to grasp the full, beautiful irony of her standing on my lawn with her fake paperwork, I need to back up. I need to explain who I am, what I do, and exactly what that block of houses was. You see, my name is Harrison. I'm a real estate investor, But I don't flip single houses. That's a high-risk, low-reward game. My company specializes in something different. We buy entire distressed blocks. We look for forgotten, rundown, and neglected parcels, a whole street of boarded-up houses, a defunct strip mall, an old industrial park, and we buy the entire thing in one clean, off-market transaction. We then redevelop the whole area, changing the landscape and hopefully improving the community. It's a quiet, patient, and very, very thorough business. You don't succeed by being loud, you succeed by being prepared. For over a year, my target had been a 12-property block known as Briarwood. It was a perfect candidate. 12 small, 1950s-era homes on a single dead-end street. It was a time capsule of neglect. The windows were boarded up, the yards were jungles of weeds and dead trees, and the city had long since given up on it. But for me, Briarwood wasn't just a perfect candidate. It was personal. My grandparents lived on this very block in the 1950s. I spent my childhood running down these streets. When I saw this neighborhood, once full of laughter, now called a blight by the people next door, I decided I would save it. This wasn't just business. This was about legacy. But its location was also perfect. It was adjacent to a beautiful park on one side, and on the other, it shared a property line with the pristine, immaculate, and obsessively managed neighborhood of Harmony Creek. Harmony Creek was a different world. It was a kingdom of beige siding, perfectly uniform mailboxes, and lawns that looked like they were cut with scissors. And every kingdom needs a ruler. Harmony Creek was ruled by the woman on my lawn, Karen. She wasn't just the HOA president, she was its self-appointed monarch. This was a woman who lived for the power of her position. She was notorious for measuring the height of her neighbor's grass with a ruler. She fined people if their garbage cans were visible from the street for more than an hour. She was, in every sense of the word, a tyrant who believed her small slice of suburbia was the center of the universe. And for years, Karen had one singular obsession, Briarwood. She despised it. She saw it as a blight, an eyesore that was personally insulting her and dragging down her property values. For at least 5 years, she had been on a public crusade to get her hands on that land. She lobbied the city to condemn the properties. She sent letters to the county complaining about squatters and rats. Her grand vision, which she had detailed in numerous HOA newsletters, was to have the city seize the block, demolish the slums, and have the Harmony Creek HOA annex the land. She wanted to turn it into a private park for HOA members, complete with a new tennis court and a reflection pond. She was the classic HOA president who believed her power extended far beyond her actual property lines. And before we go any further, I have to ask, what is the absolute worst HOA power trip you have ever seen or heard of? Let me know in the comments, because I have a feeling Karen's story might just take the top spot. While Karen was busy writing angry letters and holding meetings, I was doing my job. My team spent months digging through property records. We discovered that all 12 Briarwood properties weren't individually owned. They were all held by a single, out-of-state investment firm that had gone bankrupt. The block was tied up in a complicated receivership. It wasn't for sale, unless you knew who to ask. So I started making quiet, professional inquiries. I didn't talk to the city. I didn't alert the neighbors. I went straight to the bank that held the note. It took 8 months of negotiation. Karen, meanwhile, was getting louder. She started circulating flyers about her future Harmony Creek Park. We found out she was even collecting donations from her residents to build a legal fund for the annexation. She was building up this fantasy, completely unaware that a professional was moving silently in the background. 6 weeks before that morning with the police, the deal was done. I signed the papers. My company became the sole legal owner of all 12 Briarwood properties, the street they sat on, and the land they occupied. The bank was thrilled to have the toxic asset off its books, and I was thrilled to start the work. I knew there might be some friction. I expected a nosy neighbor or two. I even anticipated a heated conversation with the HOA president. What I didn't anticipate was an ambush. I didn't expect her to actually file fraudulent paperwork with the county. And I certainly didn't expect her to call 911 and try to have me arrested on my first day of work. She thought she was swatting a squatter. She had no idea she had just declared war on the one person who had more right to be there than anyone, and who had the receipts to prove it. And that's the key. She had no idea. She was operating on pure, arrogant assumption, while I was operating on legally binding contracts. The friction I was expecting, it didn't wait a week. It started the very first day I set foot on my new property as its owner. The deal for Briarwood had officially closed the night before. All 12 properties were now legally mine. I woke up early, grabbed a coffee and my notepad, and drove over in my truck. I wasn't bringing a crew. This wasn't a work day. This was a vision day. I just wanted to park and walk the block, house by house, dreaming up the future for each of them. I pulled my truck onto the cracked driveway of House 1, the one closest to the Harmony Creek property line. I hadn't even been out of the vehicle for 30 seconds when I heard it. A sharp, commanding, "Excuse me," from across the street. I looked over. There she was, standing on her perfect, emerald green lawn. Karen. She was in a full jogging suit but was perfectly still, arms crossed, staring at my truck. I gave a polite, neighborly wave. "Morning," I said. She didn't wave back. She marched straight across the street, onto my new property, and stopped about 10 feet from me. "Who are you?" she demanded. Not, "Hello," not, "Can I help you," but, "Who are you?" I kept my tone light. "Just Harrison. I'm here to take a look at the property." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't be here. This entire block is private property." I almost smiled. "Well, you're right about that. Don't worry, I'm authorized to be here." I intentionally kept it vague. In my line of work, you never reveal the full scope of your project to a nosy neighbor on day one. It just invites trouble. "Authorized," she scoffed. The sound was incredibly dismissive. Authorized by who? The city? I am the HOA president for Harmony Creek, and I can tell you, nobody is authorized to be here. This block is a public nuisance. I just gave her a calm, steady look. "I appreciate your concern for the neighborhood, but really, I have the proper authorization. I'm just here to do a preliminary walkthrough." She looked at my truck, then at me, then at the boarded-up house. She was sizing me up, and I could tell she had already decided I was a threat. She probably thought I was a squatter, or maybe a scrapper looking to steal copper pipes. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for trespassers," she said, her voice dropping. "I'm watching you." And with that, she turned around, marched back to her lawn, and just stood there. For the next hour, as I walked from house to house, clipboard in hand, she just stood there. At one point, she took out her phone and very obviously began filming me. It was creepy, it was intimidating, but I had every right to be there, so I just ignored her and kept taking my notes. That was day 1. Day 2 was when she escalated. I came back the next morning, this time with a small tool bag to check the plumbing and electrical boxes. As I pulled up, I saw something new. Something that made my blood run a little cold. Dotted along the front lawns of my properties, nailed to the trees and stapled to the boarded-up windows, were brand new, shiny, laminated signs. They were bright red. In huge, bold letters, they read, "Property of Harmony Creek, Future Development Site. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." I couldn't believe the audacity. She had physically trespassed onto my land to post signs claiming my land was hers. This wasn't just a nosy neighbor anymore. This was a declaration. She was actively and publicly claiming ownership of my properties. This is a serious, illegal act called slander of title. She was setting a trap. She wanted a confrontation. She wanted someone to challenge her so she could call the police. I was examining one of the signs, just shaking my head, when I heard her voice again. "Did you not see the signs?" She was on her lawn, phone out, recording me again. This time, I didn't try to be nice. I just looked at her. "You need to take these down," I said firmly. "You are trespassing and these signs are false. This is not your property." Karen's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. Her knuckles were white as she gripped her phone. She hated being told no. "I am giving you one final warning," she shouted across the street, her voice sharp. "The police have been notified of the annexation. This block is ours. If I see your truck here again, I won't just be filming. I will have you arrested for criminal trespassing. You've been warned." She stormed back into her house. I just stood there. So that was her plan. Not to talk, not to ask, but to annex. To steal. She had no idea what she had just started. I knew then that my quiet, simple renovation project was about to become a war. A war isn't won by backing down. I had a legal, binding contract. I had 12 properties to restore. I wasn't going to be scared off my own land by a woman with a clipboard and a superiority complex. So, the next morning I brought in my team. It was just a small crew. My 2 lead assessors, Mark and Dave. We weren't there to start demolition. We weren't there to make noise. We were there to do the quiet, boring, essential work, mapping out the plumbing, checking the structural integrity of the foundations, and creating a work plan. I'd warned them, "Listen, the HOA President next door is intense. She thinks she owns the place. Just keep your heads down, ignore her, and let's get this assessment done." We parked our 3 trucks in a row on the cracked driveway of the first house. Mark was unfurling a long, 100-foot measuring tape. Dave was at the main water shutoff for the block, prying off the heavy iron lid. I was standing in the middle of the street, taking a panoramic photo of the block for our before file. We were there for maybe 10 minutes. That's when I heard the siren. At first, it was distant. I figured it was just passing on the main highway. But it didn't pass. It got louder, and it was joined by another, then a third. My stomach tightened. I looked at Mark. He'd stopped. We all looked towards the entrance of the street. A police cruiser turned hard onto the block, its lights flashing, painting the boarded-up houses in strobing flashes of red and blue. Right behind it, a second cruiser. And behind that, a third. They didn't just pull up and park. They fanned out, angling their cars in a V formation, completely blocking the only entrance and exit to the street. My heart wasn't racing. It just felt cold. This wasn't a check-in. This was an ambush. This was the shock and awe attack she had been planning. The car doors slammed open, one after another. Officers were stepping out, hands on their belts, all looking at me and my crew. They looked serious. And then she emerged. Karen. She walked out of her front door, not in a jogging suit, but in a crisp, white blazer. She held her clipboard to her chest like a shield. She looked smug, righteous, and absolutely, unequivocally triumphant. This was her moment. This was her Super Bowl. And she had an audience. As if on cue, 6 of her Harmony Creek neighbors popped out onto their perfect lawns, phones up, all recording. They were here for the show. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly," she shouted. Her voice was sharp and clear in the sudden, quiet tension. She marched right past the officers, across the street, and onto my lawn, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger right at me. "That's him. That's the ringleader." Mark and Dave had frozen. They looked at me, their faces a perfect mask of, "What on earth did you get us into?" A tall sergeant stepped forward, intercepting her. "Ma'am, calm down. What's the situation?" "That man," she said, practically spitting the words, "is a professional squatter. I warned him yesterday, and he came back with a gang. A gang. 2 middle-aged guys in tool belts. They are committing criminal trespass and mass vandalism," she yelled, for the benefit of the cameras. "I demand you arrest them." The officer looked at me. I was just a guy in jeans and a polo shirt, holding a smartphone. He looked at my crew. He looked at our trucks. He was clearly trying to make sense of the situation. "Ma'am, these look like work trucks. Are you sure they're not?" "I have proof," she shrieked, cutting him off. She tapped her clipboard with a manic energy. "This entire block," she swept her arm out, "was officially annexed by the Harmony Creek HOA last night. It is our common property. These men are destroying it. Here." She shoved her stack of papers into the officer's hand. Her fraudulent, worthless annexation papers. The ones she'd filed, sure, but the ones that had zero legal standing. But in that moment, to an officer on the street, they looked official. They had stamps. They had signatures. The sergeant began to read the first page, his brow furrowed in concentration. Karen, sensing her victory, turned to me. Her face was flushed with adrenaline, and she gave me a cold, venomous smile. "I want them in handcuffs, officer," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, authoritative tone. "All 3 of them. I want them charged. We will be prosecuting to the fullest extent of the law." I was surrounded. Police in front of me. Nosy neighbors filming me. And this woman, standing on my property, dictating my arrest. This was the public humiliation she had dreamed of. This was the point of no return. She thought she had won. She had no idea that I let her walk right into the perfect trap. And she had no idea how perfect that trap was. While the sergeant was looking at her annex plan, and Karen was soaking in her moment of victory, I just stood there. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just let her finish her entire performance. When she was finally quiet, all eyes turned to me. The neighbors were filming. The cops were waiting for my response. Mark and Dave looked like they were about to be sick. I just gave a small, polite cough. "Officer," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I understand her confusion. She seems to want this land very badly." Karen's face tightened. "He's a con artist, officer. Don't listen to him." I ignored her. I looked right at the sergeant. "I do have my identification, as I mentioned. But I have something a little more substantial. Would you mind?" I turned, walked slowly to the passenger seat of my truck, and picked up the black leather briefcase I always carry with me. I clicked the latches, opened it, and pulled out a thick, bound document. It had a blue cover sheet from the county recorder's office, covered in official stamps and signatures. It was heavy. I walked back and handed it not to Karen, but directly to the sergeant. "That," I said quietly, "is the finalized recorded master deed for the entire Briarwood block. All 12 properties, the street itself, and the land under it. It was filed with the county 6 weeks ago. You'll also find my driver's license and my articles of incorporation showing I am the sole owner." The silence that fell over the street was almost deafening. The only sound was the officer's hand as he flipped the cover page. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the legal description, then the signature page. His expression went from confused to professional to visibly annoyed. He looked up, not at me, but right at Karen. He handed her back her flimsy stack of HOA meeting minutes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and all business, "these papers you gave me are an intent to file. They mean nothing. This," he held up my master deed, "is a legally recorded deed of sale. This gentleman, Harrison, owns this entire block. He has every right to be here. You do not. You are currently trespassing on his private property." It was like watching a balloon deflate. The color drained from Karen's face. Her smug smile just melted. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The neighbors filming suddenly got very, very quiet. One of them actually lowered their phone. "What?" Karen finally sputtered. That's impossible. He's lying. My papers are filed. We had a vote." The sergeant just shook his head. He was done. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. But as of right now, you are the one harassing a legal property owner. I suggest you take your signs, go back to your property, and do not contact this man again." If we have to come back out here, it will be to cite you." He handed me back my deed, gave me a curt nod, and turned to his men. "Let's go. We're done here." The officers got in their cars, backed out one by one, and in less than a minute, they were gone. The circus was over. It was just me, my crew, and Karen, standing in the middle of the street, surrounded by her neighbors. She was shaking, not with anger, but with pure, uncut humiliation. She had staged a massive shock and awe attack, and it had blown up in her face in the most public way possible. She looked at me, her face a mask of such profound hatred that it was almost impressive. Then, without a word, she turned and stormed back to her house. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think that level of public embarrassment would be enough for her to cut her losses. You would be wrong. 2 days later, a courier served me papers. She had actually done it. She'd hired a lawyer and filed an injunction to stop all my work, claiming her fraudulent annexation paperwork was valid. She was suing me, claiming my purchase was fraudulent. I just looked at the papers. This was the biggest mistake of her life. She hadn't just humiliated herself. She had now, officially, declared war on me in a court of law. This was my world. This was my expertise. I had been a victim. Now I was a strategist. I got on the phone. I didn't call my normal, everyday business lawyer. Called the sharks. I called the top-tier, most expensive, most ruthless real estate litigation firm in the state. I told them to spare no expense. I wasn't just going to defend myself against her lawsuit. I was going to destroy her with a countersuit. We filed for malicious prosecution based on the false police report. We filed for slander of title for her illegal signs and fraudulent county filings. And we filed for defamation for standing in front of half a dozen witnesses with cameras and accusing me of being a criminal, squatter, and the leader of a gang. She had brought a clipboard to a legal war. I was about to bring the entire army. And that army, it was something to behold. My legal team was, as I said, the best in the state. When they took a case, they didn't just plan to win, they planned to annihilate. The discovery phase of the lawsuit, where both sides have to show their evidence, was a goldmine. Karen and her HOA lawyer had to provide every email, every newsletter, and every meeting minute related to her annexation project. And we, in turn, provided our one, simple, ironclad document, the master deed. The difference was her entire case was built on a fantasy, and mine was built on a fact. Months later, we finally walked into the courtroom. This wasn't a big jury trial. My lawyers had filed for a summary judgment. This meant we were asking a judge to just look at the plain facts and end the case immediately because there was no real dispute. It was just us, the lawyers, and the judge. Karen was there, sitting at the other table, wearing that same crisp blazer. She still had that look of absolute certainty, as if she was the victim here, a brave community leader fighting off a hostile invader. She genuinely believed her HOA was the same as federal law. Her lawyer went first, arguing why her injunction should be granted. He stood up and presented his core evidence, her annexation paperwork. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd seen it all, picked up the stack of papers. She looked over her glasses at Karen's lawyer. "Counselor," she said, her voice flat, "this appears to be a copy of HOA meeting minutes. It states your client's desire to annex this land. It has no legal bearing on anything. Where is your claim to the title?" Karen's lawyer started to stammer. "But, Your Honor, the vote was unanimous. The filing with the county." The judge cut him off, her voice sharp. "You filed meeting minutes with the county. That is not a deed. That is not a title. That is paper." She looked at me, then back at him. The defendant, on the other hand, has provided a legally recorded, finalized master deed. There is no dispute here. She banged her gavel. The plaintiff's injunction is denied. This case is dismissed with prejudice. It took less than 10 minutes. Karen's entire crusade was over. Her face went a chalky white. She looked at her lawyer, absolutely stunned. But she didn't even have time to process it. My lead lawyer stood up. "Thank you, Your Honor. We would now like to proceed with our countersuit against Ms. Karen, personally, and the HOA. Karen's lawyer's head snapped up. "Your Honor, this is an abuse of—" "Your client sued mine, counselor," the judge said, her patience clearly gone. He was forced to retain counsel. He has every right to be heard. Proceed. And that's when the army marched. My lawyer was magnificent. He was calm, prepared, and absolutely brutal. "Your Honor," he began, "we will first address the count of malicious prosecution. Ms. Karen called 911 reporting criminal activity. She reported a gang of squatters. She did this knowing it was, at best, a civil dispute, and at worst, a complete fabrication. She intentionally and maliciously used public resources, 3 police cruisers, to harass and intimidate my client. Next, defamation. We would now like to play the body cam footage from the responding officer." The courtroom audio was crystal clear. We all heard Karen's entire performance. "He's a criminal. He's a ringleader. He's part of a gang." Then, my lawyer played the videos from the neighbors, the ones she had encouraged to film. We heard her shout, "He's a professional squatter." I watched Karen. She was sinking lower and lower in her chair. The smug certainty was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. My lawyer continued. "Slander of title." Ms. Karen posted these signs. He held up a giant photo of her "No trespassing" sign on property she knew was not hers in an attempt to devalue it and scare off my client. But he saved the kill shot for last. And finally, Your Honor, the matter of how this malicious lawsuit was funded. Karen's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. Relevance." "It is highly relevant, Your Honor," my lawyer said smoothly, "as it proves a pattern of fraud, malice, and a breach of her own fiduciary duty." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Overruled. I'll allow it. Get to the point, counselor." My lawyer called our expert, a forensic accountant. This accountant had gone through the HOA's public tax filings and the discovery documents. He explained, in simple, clear terms, that the legal fund Karen had collected from her neighbors for her annexation project was the exact fund she was using to pay her lawyer. For this lawsuit, this is where the judge's demeanor changed. She wasn't just annoyed. She was furious. She leaned forward, her voice like ice. "Ms. Karen, did you use your residents' money to fund this personal vendetta?" Karen was trapped. "It was an HOA matter. The board approved it." "The board approved you suing a legal property owner based on fraudulent claims? You used your neighbor's money to harass this man, and then you doubled down by forcing him into this courtroom, all while paying for your fantasy with their funds." The judge didn't need to hear any more. She banged the gavel again. "I am granting a summary judgment in favor of the defendant, Mr. Harrison, on all counts of his countersuit." She wasn't done. This court finds that Ms. Karen acted with gross negligence and malice. She abused her position of power, she filed fraudulent documents, she defamed this man, and she misappropriated HOA funds. Then came the words that ended her life as she knew it. "This court is piercing the corporate veil. The HOA's insurance will not protect you. This judgment is against you, personally." She was found personally liable for everything. Her own lawyer's fees, my lawyer's fees, and my army was very, very expensive. And on top of that, a massive 6-figure sum in punitive damages for the defamation and malice. Karen made a small, gasping sound like she'd been punched. She looked at her lawyer, but he was just staring at his notepad, defeated. It was over. The Katma. The total end. Her little power trip hadn't just failed, it was about to cost her everything she owned. And everything was the exact price. That judgment wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was a financial knockout. The total bill, once my lawyers, the army's, fees were added, was well into the high six figures. Karen simply didn't have the money. As the judge had warned, the HOA's insurance refused to pay a cent, claiming her actions were willful, malicious, and fraudulent. She was completely, totally on her own. The news of the judgment and the embezzlement hit the Harmony Creek neighborhood like an earthquake. The same neighbors who had been filming me, thinking I was the villain, were now absolutely furious. They realized Karen hadn't just been a bully, she had been stealing from them to fund her personal, obsessive little war. There was an emergency board meeting that very night. I wasn't there, of course, but I heard it was a bloodbath. She was unanimously and disgracefully removed from her presidency, stripped of all power, all titles. Just like that, her reign was over. But that didn't solve her money problem. My lawyers, doing their job, filed the liens against her assets. She had no choice. Within a month, a for sale sign went up on the lawn of her perfect, pristine home. The very house she was trying to protect from the eyesore next door. She had to sell it just to pay the damages she owed me. That wasn't even the khatma, the total end. The judge's ruling about the misappropriated funds triggered a full, formal investigation by the state attorney general. The fraud my accountant found was just the tip of the iceberg. The state's audit uncovered years of financial mismanagement, self-dealing, and abuse of power. The HOA was declared corrupt and financially insolvent. About 6 months later, the state forcibly dissolved it. Her entire kingdom just evaporated. And me? With Karen gone and her HOA in ashes, my work on the Briarwood block finally began. There was no one to stop me. No more fake signs, no more police calls, no more drama. My crews got to work. We spent the next year transforming that block. We didn't demolish those 12 old houses. We restored them. We brought back the historic charm, modernized the interiors, and planted new trees. The rundown, forgotten blight became the most beautiful, quiet, and sought-after street in the entire area. And the best, most beautiful irony of all? The property values in the former Harmony Creek neighborhood, the ones right next door, skyrocketed. My project, the very thing she tried to destroy, ended up making all of her old neighbors a massive amount of money. In the end, she could have just walked over that first day and said, "Hello." But her arrogance wouldn't let her. She had to choose a war. And in the end, the only person she destroyed was herself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious to hear what you all think. What do you believe was Karen's single biggest mistake? Was it calling the cops in the first place? Or was it doubling down and suing me? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to like and subscribe for more.